I'd like to discuss the proposed hostage ceasefire, which is just on the verge of taking hold. It officially was announced, and at the time of this recording, Hamas is pulling back on certain agreements, so we don't know what the status of the ceasefire is actually going to be. However, this is a very critical subject and conversation that must be had, despite the fact that it's very difficult for me to discuss it because of the weight that sits on all sides of this ceasefire agreement. And I'm going to be sharing two clips with you. One clip from the preeminent Jewish leader of the Jewish world, the Lubavitcher Rebbes, the great spiritual leader, whose guidance was sought out from all Israeli leaders during his lifetime, and also lahavdil, a quote from one of the current top Hamas leaders after this ceasefire agreement was signed, even though they're now bringing new complications into it, which is very, very classic and very typical of Hamas to do. This is exactly the game that they play. But here's the reason why this whole conversation about the ceasefire is so controversial, why it's so controversial in Israel, why there are so many people for it, which I think is very easy to understand, and why there are so many people against it, which maybe not everyone understands. And I would like to explain all of that. What we're balancing over here is, on one hand, clearly and understandably, I don't think any decent person needs an explanation, the hostages, and by extension, the hostages' families. They are living in a state which I cannot even imagine. I truly cannot imagine. I cannot imagine what it is that they are dealing with. At the same time, and that's on one side of it, and that's clear, we must have some way of getting every single hostage back, everyone that is living, getting them back alive, those who are tragically not living, at least to get their bodies so that they can have what we call a kvurat Yisrael, a Jewish burial. This is, we must do this. On the other hand, on the other side of this, what we have weighing very heavily is the security of Israel in the future, especially based on history that we have, to know historically what happens when certain agreements are made and what that does to the security of Israel. Namely, it weakens the security of Israel, leading to exactly what we're dealing with right now. And that is very, very serious, even though the emotional burden is so enormous, right? A leader needs to be able to still create the balance of what is going to be best for us overall. And really what it comes down to is that on one side of the table, we have hostages that must be released. We have hostages who must get their freedom back. We have and the families who are living through torment, which is beyond imagination, on every single day, every single minute. And on the other hand, we have over 400 IDF soldiers who lost their lives, and then hundreds who have serious injuries, many of them lifelong injuries that they're going to have to deal with. And having visited one of the main rehabilitation centers in Israel, very serious injuries, and them wanting to be sure, as they should want, that their lives and their sacrifices were not in vain, but were put towards a long-term solution. And that clearly on the ground has not been accomplished yet. Hamas is still alive and well. Hamas can easily rearm right now and just get right back to where they're at. And this is the concern on the other side, which would then mean that we lost hundreds of soldiers' lives to get back the hostages, and then to have rockets flying into Israel again, and the rockets are not getting smaller; they're getting bigger. This is the very, very difficult balance of this dilemma of what to do. And here's another point I want to make, and that is that there are two sides. There are two parties that are involved directly here, which we have to, in my opinion, separate. The first party that's involved here are the hostages and their families. And the hostages and their families, and primarily, of course, in this case, the families, they have a duty to their family members to do everything possible, to lobby, to pressure, to do anything and everything they can, to throw money out, whatever involves, anything they can to release their relatives from captivity. That is absolutely their obligation, and they have to care, and their responsibility is to care about their family member. There is a hierarchy of actually priorities that the Torah gives us about who we have to be most concerned about. And that's one party, the family of the hostages. There's another party, and that is the government and the military. I put them into one, the government and the military. And they have a responsibility to the safety and security of the Jewish people in Israel long term. And both of these parties sit on different sides of the fence, and that's fine. That's the reality. And by the way, this entire conflict that gets created within the Israeli society, which is really essentially between government, military versus the families of the hostages, is exactly what Hamas is trying to create and has created very, very successfully. This is exactly what they are using as leverage to weaken the Israeli society, government, military, and that is the heartstrings that are being pulled because they know how much we value life, how much we care about the people that we love. What do we do? Well, I'm going to show you a clip from the Lubavitcher Rebbe where he discusses exactly this. And I want to say, before I show you this clip, that this, be able to make a decision, 2 points. Point number one is, from a halachic point of view, that means from a point of view of Jewish law, this is debated. This isn't black and white. However, when we hear the Rebbe speak about it, it seems quite clear that the Rebbe is very clear about the position we should be taking. Even though there are other Jewish leaders who take other positions, the Rebbe seems very clear about the position that we should be taking in circumstances like this. It is very clear who the Rebbe puts the responsibility on, both for why we're in this situation and also for who's responsible to make sure we never find ourselves in this situation again. So all of that must be understood, and also to understand that to make the right decision is very, very difficult. This is not a justification. It's not an excuse. I don't care if it's difficult. If you're in a leadership position, you have a responsibility to make that difficult decision. However, I just want to point out so we can understand it that in my experience in our Western society, I'm sitting here in America, that the great weakness we have in our society today is that we are scared to say the truth because someone's going to call us out. They're going to say we're this phobic, a racist, whatever names they're going to sling at us, so that they intimidate us into a minority position to defend a few people at the expense of compromising the rights of many, many people. That is what is going on in the world today. Possibly the pendulum is swinging back now. That's very possible. But this is the issue here, where we have something very, very heavy emotionally on one side, and yet on the other side, we know that if we make the emotional decision, it's going to cost us far more than we are saving. This is the issue, and it's a long-term security of millions of Jews living in the Holy Land. That's what we're discussing. Let's watch this clip from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's very, very telling. Here it goes.
Jeden, was so gefunden, Bashevi. Und hat ihm die Gewalt herauslassen. Bashevi in Zatsche Knege. Bis wann hat nicht gebeten, nach Fettlich und 70 von Zatsche Knege. Begoli hat ihn gesagt, aber wie bald das in die Gewänke in andere Brille. Und wie bald hat das Jeden mit ihm gesprochen. Wenn hat sich nicht gekonnt rechnen, wie viel mit der Fall herauslassen. Von dieser Assurim hat das so getan. Beschaß mir sagt, dass in Teine. Und Rachmon al-Islam, jeder Rede verweitigt, und der hat als Sipur, als nicht eine Gewänke in anderen Wege, aber frei, Seiden hat befreit, 70, tracht bei sich, öfter das der Weg, und sie öfter in die Gewänke in anderen Wege, und Nefe, Schachas, Misrael, ich kiem, Elamol, Arachas kam, es rät sich mehr nicht wegen 70. hatten angesagt, die Räder und die Schreier in Eretz Akedisch und in Chutzlores sollt machen, als Schweig, wer der 70 sein, Adrabe, man soll machen, Simches wie Hilulis, und wir wissen, dass da andere, was meise sibische Tiere, wenn sie das Sof Megale sein, bis wann es dann mit Megale gewesen. Als zwischen die etliche und 70 gewesen, a Timata halb, und die, was eine dort nicht gewesen, bei Beis Asuri, wegen Unionen von Mabekach, was viele wegen Unionen von Mabekach hat nicht angehalten, die Schiete, Jorno Hanan, auf nicht noch geben sich in die Jungen von Terroristen. Ich dort gewesen, Korrev zu halb etlich und 30, und die, was haben Befehl, sich vernommen, mit Unionen von Meise Chavolo, bis Meise Chavolo, was hat gekostet, nicht Forschis Mamosch. Eibse, das ist der richtige Tag, mit der Time, wie Chulu, was hat die davon gemacht, das so? Da konnte ich Atchile sagen. Aber wie der Meise ist Befehl, nur dem hat kein Brede nicht mit der Time in Pschut, in Zahn im Kmus, wie Chulu, muss nach Riesel, nach Monil Islam, nach Ratschen, was sagt Befehl ist, auch halte, welche Leid heuer ist hier. Das am meisten, was wir können, haben zurück. Die etliche und 70 gefühlen sich bekopft und gefühlen sich in dem Mord, was Rachmon el-Islam heuer Lissie, wir setzen nicht gesehen, wo sollen sich nicht mit Stadel sein, noch einmal heuer Lissie. Komur, in Friedrich ist wahr, das wird Schaß Rachmon el-Islam mich speit. Und weiß, dass sie gespiegen im Pony. Sagt mir in einer zweiten, dass Gishmi broche. Und heißt soll machen, broche, der Teva Ameti, nicht broche Befehl, machen Bankett, machen Maseltov, soll tanzen in die Gassen. Und nur wegen vorne mit allen Sachen, was damit verbunden.
You can see that the Rebbe is stating very clearly that, we're being sold a boat of goods which don't really exist, and we're being convinced that something is good, when actually what we're doing is we're creating a far, 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 far greater danger than we currently have, which is just unbelievably shocking. In fact, this is exactly what led to October 7th, is the letting out of terrorists. And here, as evidence of this, we can see that right after this ceasefire was signed, which of course now is still up in the air, but right after it was signed by Hamas, one of the top Hamas leaders, what does he say? I'm going to show it to you, actually. He states that we are going to create another October 7th. They are totally committed. In other words, over the last 15, 16 months, nothing has actually changed in the position of Israel in relation to Hamas. Hamas remains still committed and dedicated to wiping out Israel, God forbid, which will never happen, but that's what they are committed to. And the moment they have their next ability, they're going to do that. And the moment they can take out one Israeli life, one Jewish life, they're going to do that. They're absolutely committed to it. It's not like we didn't wipe them. We didn't stop the problem, which we must stop. Let's watch this clip, which is quite shocking.
تناثرت أشلاؤهم في هذه المعركة وإننا سنواصل على درب القادة الشهداء حتى النصر أو الشهادة بإذن الله. وما حدث في 7 أكتوبر من إعجاز وإنجاز عسكري وإنجاز أمني قامت به نخبة القسام سيبقى مفخرة لشعبنا ومقاومتنا تتناقله الأجيال جيلا بعد جيل، وقد أصابت كيان العدو في مقتل، وسيستعيد شعبنا كامل حقوقه بإذن الله، وسيندحر هذا الاحتلال عن أرضنا وقدسنا ومقدساتنا عما قريب بإذن الله تعالى. وإنما قام به الاحتلال وداعموه من حرب إبادة وحشية وجرائم نازية ومعاداة للإنسانية على مدار 467 يوما سيبقى محفورا في ذاكرة شعبنا والعالم وإلى الأبد كأبشع إبادة جماعية في العصر الحديث. ولن ينسى شعبنا كل من شارك في حرب الإبادة. سواء من وفر لها الغطاء السياسي والإعلامي أو من قدموا آلاف الأطنان من القنابل والمتفجرات التي أسقطت على رؤوس أهلنا وأبنائنا وبناتنا وأطفالنا في قطاع غزة. ونؤكد أن كل هؤلاء المجرمين سيلقون جزاء ما قدموا وفعلوا ولو بعد حين. لن ننسى ولن نغفر، نعم لن ننسى ولن نغفر. ففشل في تحقيق أي من أهدافه السرية أو المعلنة، فقد ثبت شعبنا في أرضه فلم يرحل ولم يهاجر، وكان الدرع الحصين لمقاومته. إن هذه المعركة التي بدأت من أجل القدس وستبقى القدس والأقصى بوصلتنا وعنوان جهادنا ومقاومتنا حتى التحرير وإقامة الدولة المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس بإذن الله.
This is the greatest evidence of the fact that this ceasefire is extremely, extremely dangerous. Israel must find the strength to be committed to absolutely wiping out Hamas, which it has not done. It must wipe out Hamas so that they don't exist with the possibility of this mission, which is exactly what their mission is. And they've got to find a way, if they feel if Israel, either despite America or get America on board. But we must do this.